My sister totaled my brand new company car, the one I'd worked years to afford, and expected me to just roll over and forgive her. She sneered that our parents would force me to, but she had no idea I had already called my lawyer. I was about to teach her a lesson in consequences she would never forget. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The call came on a Tuesday, a day already thick with the oppressive gray of a relentless drizzle and the dull throb behind my temples that signaled an impending migraine. I was curled up on my sofa, wrapped in a thick chenille blanket, trying to summon the energy to make a cup of tea. It had been a brutal week of deadlines, staring at blueprints until my vision blurred, and I was feeling the bone-deep exhaustion that only comes from pouring every last ounce of yourself into your work. My body had finally waved a white flag demanding rest. It was in this state of profound vulnerability, with my defenses down and my body aching, that the phone rang. It was my mom, Helen. Her voice, usually a calm and soothing presence in my life, was stretched thin, tight with a nervous energy that immediately set my teeth on edge. "Riley, honey, are you sitting down?" My heart gave a painful lurch. "Mom, what is it? What's wrong?" I sat up, the blanket pooling around my waist. My mind raced through a horrifying Rolodex of possibilities: an accident, a diagnosis, something terrible happening to my dad. "It's about Chloe," she said, and I felt a flicker of relief, which was instantly replaced by a familiar sense of dread. Trouble and my younger sister, Chloe, were frequent companions. "There's been an incident with your car." My car, my beautiful, sleek, midnight blue car. It wasn't just a vehicle, it was a trophy. A symbol of every late night, every sacrificed weekend, every ounce of determination I had poured into building my freelance architectural drafting business from the ground up. I had only owned it for a week. 7 perfect, glorious days. I had saved for years, meticulously planning, denying myself frivolous things, all for the moment I could finally buy a reliable, professional vehicle that was truly mine. It was registered under my LLC, a tangible asset of my hard-won success. "What incident?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She borrowed it, honey, just for a little while, to go see some friends from her art class," Mom began, her words tumbling out in a rushed, apologetic stream. "She was going to ask, but you were resting, and she didn't want to bother you." The excuses were already starting, a soft verbal cushion designed to break a fall I didn't yet understand the height of. "Borrowed it?" I repeated, my voice hardening. "Mom, she doesn't have a key. How did she borrow it?" A pause, then a sigh. "Your spare key. The one you leave in the ceramic pot by the door for emergencies." An emergency, I thought numbly, was a house fire or a medical crisis, not a joyride. "Where is she, Mom? Where is my car?" "There on the side of the road on Milner Avenue. Riley, she hit a patch of wet leaves and skidded. She crashed into a guardrail." My mom's voice cracked. "The car it's not good, honey, but Chloe is fine. That's the important thing, not a scratch on her." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to tilt, the dull throb in my head sharpening into a piercing spike of pain. All that work, all that sacrifice, crumpled against a guardrail because my sister couldn't be bothered to respect the one significant thing I had ever owned. "I'm on my way," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. The scene was worse than I could have imagined. My car, my beautiful car, was a mangled wreck. The entire front driver's side was caved in, the headlight shattered like a crystallized tear, the fender buckled into a grotesque accordion of metal. Chloe was standing beside it, scrolling through her phone, looking bored. A tow truck was already there, its yellow lights flashing in the dreary rain, casting a sickly glow on the scene. I walked toward her, my movements stiff, my stomach churning with a cold, hard knot of fury. She looked up, and for a fleeting second I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a familiar, defiant smirk. "Oops," she said, her tone dripping with a casual indifference that was more insulting than any apology could have been. "Oops," I echoed, my voice shaking with a rage so profound it felt like it was vibrating in my bones. "Chloe, this is a $28,000 car. I've had it for 1 week. 1 week." She shrugged, tucking her phone into the back pocket of her ripped jeans. "It was an accident. The leaves were, like, super slippery." She looked me up and down, tacky. NG in my pale face and the way I was clutching my arms around myself as if to hold myself together. That's when the smirk widened into a confident, cruel grin. "Don't be so dramatic, Riley. It's just a car. Mom and Dad will make you forgive me. They always do." The words hit me harder than the sight of the wreckage. The casual certainty in her voice, the absolute conviction that she would, once again, be shielded from the consequences of her own reckless actions, was a slap in the face. She saw me not as her sister, but as an obstacle that our parents would simply manage. In that moment, staring at the ruin of my hard work and the smug entitlement on my sister's face, something inside me shifted. A quiet, cold resolve settled over my heart, extinguishing the fiery rage and leaving behind an icy calm. She was right about one thing: our parents would try. But this time, they were going to fail. The betrayal was worse than the damage itself. The drive home from the crash site was a blur of rain-streaked lights and the monotonous rhythm of the tow truck's wipers. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the slick, dark asphalt, my mind a maelstrom of shock and fury. My parents, Mark and Helen, had arrived shortly after me, their faces etched with a mixture of concern for Chloe and weary resignation for the situation. My father, a man who navigated life by avoiding confrontation at all costs, clapped me on the shoulder with a heavy sigh. "We'll sort it out, Riley. Don't you worry." My mother fussed over Chloe, checking for invisible injuries and murmuring soothing words, while Chloe soaked up the attention like a wilting plant finally being watered. That evening, our house became a courtroom where I was simultaneously the plaintiff, the victim, and somehow the one on trial. We sat around the kitchen table, the air thick with unspoken accusations and years of pent-up resentment. Chloe, having been absolved of any immediate blame by our mother, was playing the part of the chastened child, her eyes downcast, her expression one of sullen remorse. But I could see the flicker of defiance in the set of her jaw. "I just don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of this," my dad, Mark, said, rubbing his temples. He was a high school history teacher, a man who could command a classroom of rowdy teenagers but shrank from any conflict within his own four walls. "It was an accident. These things happen." "It happened because she took my car without permission," I countered, my voice dangerously low. "She stole my key, Dad. That's not an accident. That's a choice." "She didn't steal it, Riley," my mom, Helen, interjected softly. She was a dental hygienist, skilled at calming nervous patients, and she used the same gentle, placating tone on me now. "She borrowed it. Her intentions were misguided perhaps, but not malicious." I looked from my mother's pleading face to my father's weary one. They were already building the narrative, the family-approved version of events where Chloe was a thoughtless but ultimately harmless child, and I was the rigid, unforgiving older sister. They wanted me to absorb the blow, to smooth things over, to perform the role I had been cast in since childhood. The responsible one, the one who cleaned up the messes. Chloe finally looked up, her blue eyes, so much like our mother S, shining with performative tears. "I said I was sorry," she mumbled. "I don't know what else you want from me." "I want you to understand what you've done," I snapped, my composure finally cracking. "This isn't some old beater car, Chloe. This is a major business asset. This affects my livelihood, my insurance, my finances. This is a huge, huge deal." My father held up a hand. "All right, that's enough. Yelling isn't going to solve anything. We will pay your insurance deductible, Riley. Of course, we will. And Chloe will, she'll pay you back for it, won't you, sweetie?" He looked at Chloe, who nodded meekly, a promise we all knew was as empty as her wallet. She was a part-time barista and an art student. She barely had enough money for her own expenses, let alone a multi-thousand-dollar deductible. It was then that I felt a profound sense of isolation. They were all aligned against me, a united front of enablers and the enabled. They saw the crashed car as a financial problem with a simple solution: throw money at it until it went away. They couldn't, or wouldn't, see the deeper issue: the staggering lack of respect, the casual disregard for my property and my feelings. They were so focused on restoring the family's fragile peace that they were willing to sacrifice my justice to achieve it. As I sat there, listening to their chorus of excuses and minimizations, a single, cold thought kept repeating in my mind, a silent promise to myself. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. The next day, my mother called me, her voice oozing with a practiced, cheerful optimism. "I was thinking," she began, we could all go out for a nice dinner tonight, to put this whole unpleasantness behind us. A fresh start." "A fresh start?" I asked, my voice flat. "Mom, my car is in an impound lot. The insurance adjuster hasn't even seen it yet. There is no fresh start." "Now, Riley, harboring resentment isn't healthy," she chided gently. "Chloe feels terrible, absolutely terrible. She's learned her lesson. Forgiving her is the only way for our family to heal." Heal? Their definition of healing was to pretend the wound never happened. It was to slap a bandage on a festering infection and call it cured. All it did was allow the poison to spread, ensuring the same injury would happen again and again. I listened to her go on, talking about family unity and the importance of letting things go, and with every word she spoke, my resolve hardened. They were so busy trying to manage my emotions that they weren't paying attention to my actions. They saw me as the emotional, overwrought daughter who needed to be calmed down. They didn't see the business owner who was about to make a calculated, strategic decision. They had forgotten one crucial thing, and their oversight was going to be their undoing. My relationship with Chloe had always been a study in contrasts, a delicate balance of sisterly affection and simmering resentment. I was the planner, the saver, the one who charted a course and stuck to it. From the time I was little, I had a jar for savings, carefully labeling my goals: bike, college, first car. I got a part-time job the moment I was legally able, working weekends at a local library while my friends were at the mall. I put myself through college for architectural drafting, working nights as a waitress to avoid student loans, emerging with a degree and a clear-eyed determination to build something of my own. My freelance business, Riley Designs LLC, was the culmination of that lifelong discipline. It was small, just me and a powerful computer in a spare bedroom, but it was mine. Every contract won, every blueprint delivered, was a testament to my own grit. Chloe, on the other hand, drifted through life on a cloud of charm and artistic temperament. She was the family's free spirit, the creative soul who couldn't be burdened with things like budgets or responsibilities. While I was color-coding my financial projections, she was sketching in a notebook, dreaming of becoming a famous artist. Our parents celebrated her creativity, framing her charcoal drawings and praising her unique perspective. My successes, measured in spreadsheets and client approvals, seemed cold and pragmatic by comparison. They were proud of me, I knew, but in a distant, abstract way. They understood a paycheck, but they felt a painting. This dynamic created an environment where Chloe rarely, if ever, faced the consequences of her actions. When she overspent her allowance, Mom would slip her a 20. When she got a speeding ticket, Dad would pay it, muttering about predatory police officers. They were her safety net, always there to catch her, but in doing so, they had prevented her from ever learning how to stand on her own 2 feet. This constant coddling fostered a deep-seated entitlement in her, a core belief that the world, and especially her family, owed her a soft landing. My new car was a flashpoint for this dynamic. To me, it was the result of years of disciplined work. To Chloe, it was an ostentatious display of materialism, a symbol of the boring, conventional life she disdained. A week ago, when I first brought it home, she had circled it with a critical eye. "It's nice," she'd said, the word hanging in the air with faint praise. "A little corporate, though, don't you think?" "It's practical, Chloe," I had replied, trying to keep the defensiveness out of my voice. "It's reliable for meeting with clients." "I guess," she'd sighed, flipping her hair over her shoulder. I'd rather have an old VW van, something with character, you know? Her gaze was dismissive, but I could see a flicker of something else in her eyes, envy. It wasn't that she wanted my car, it was that she resented what it represented, a level of success and independence that she hadn't yet achieved. My car was a physical manifestation of the gap between our lives, and she hated it. Her reaction after the crash was the culmination of a lifetime of being excused. She was so accustomed to our parents smoothing over her mistakes that remorse had become an unnecessary, performative emotion for her. In her world, a sincere apology wasn't required because absolution was guaranteed. Her smirk, her casual oops, her sneering confidence that I would be forced to forgive her, it wasn't just about the car. It was about power. It was her reasserting her role as the one who could break the rules without consequence, and reminding me of my role as the one who was expected to quietly accept the fallout for the sake of family harmony. My parents' gentle insistent pressure in the days following the crash only reinforced this. They saw the conflict through a simple, family-first lens. "She's your sister, Riley," my dad said during another tense phone call. "Sometimes, in a family, you have to absorb a little more than your share to keep the peace." "Why am I always the one who has to absorb it?" I asked, the question raw with years of frustration. "Because you're the stronger one," my mom chimed in from another line. "You're resilient, you can handle it. This would crush Chloe." It was a masterful piece of emotional manipulation, cloaked in the language of a compliment. They weren't just asking me to forgive Chloe. They were telling me that my strength, the very quality that had allowed me to buy the car in the first place, was now a liability, an obligation to be exploited. They used my competence as a justification for her incompetence. The more I pushed back, the more they painted me as cold and unforgiving. They weren't just enabling Chloe, they were actively trying to manage me, to reshape my legitimate anger into an unattractive personal flaw. But their pressure was having the opposite effect. It wasn't bending me to their will. It was tempering my resolve into something hard and unyielding. For 3 days, I let my family's narrative play out. I listened to my mother's wheedling phone calls, my father's heavy sighs of disappointment, and Chloe's sullen, one-word text messages asking if I was over it yet. They thought my silence was a sign of surrender, that I was slowly, grudgingly coming around to their way of thinking. They imagined I was wrestling with my feelings, trying to find it in my heart to forgive. They were wrong. I wasn't wrestling with my emotions, I was channeling them. I was gathering my resources, consulting with professionals, and preparing to shift this battle onto a field where their emotional appeals would be useless. The turning point came during a call with my insurance agent. He was a kind, fatherly man named Mr. Davison, who had handled my business insurance since I first formed the LLC. I explained the situation in cold, clear terms. An unauthorized driver had taken a company vehicle and caused significant damage. "Well, that's a straightforward unauthorized use claim, Riley," he said, his voice all business. "The responsible party's insurance will be pursued for all damages, including loss of use and diminished value. Do you have her information?" "She's my sister," I said, and for the first time, I let a hint of the family drama seep into my voice. "My parents are hoping we can handle this quietly. They've offered to pay my deductible." Mr. Davison was silent for a moment. "Riley," he said, his tone firm but gentle, "your parents mean well, I'm sure, but this vehicle is not registered to Riley the daughter. It's registered to Riley Designs, LLC. Your LLC is a separate legal entity. If you, as the director of that entity, choose not to pursue the legally liable party for damages, you could be opening yourself up to a world of trouble. At best, it's a breach of your fiduciary duty to your own company. At worst, it could be viewed as a form of insurance fraud. You are legally obligated to act in the best interest of your business. That means filing a police report for the unauthorized use and letting us, your insurer, pursue the claim as we are legally required to do." His words were like a bracing gust of wind, clearing away the fog of emotional manipulation. He had given me the ultimate shield, legal obligation. My feelings, my supposed lack of forgiveness, my stubbornness, none of it mattered anymore. This was no longer a messy family dispute. It was a formal business matter. This was the crucial thing they had all forgotten. That afternoon, I went to the police station. My hands trembled slightly as I filled out the paperwork, the formal language of the report feeling cold and foreign. Unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. It felt clinical, detached from the messy, emotional reality of the situation, but it was also empowering. I was no longer just an angry sister. I was a business owner protecting her assets. My next call was to my lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Sarah who had helped me draft my LLC incorporation documents. I explained the situation, ending with, "My family thinks I'm being vindictive. They want me to just drop it." Sarah chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Riley, what you're being is professional. Your family is used to treating you like the family peacemaker. They haven't yet learned to treat you like the CEO of a company. Let me handle the communication from here on out. It's always better when it comes from a lawyer. It takes the emotion out of it." She was right. The moment I had professional allies, an insurance agent, and a lawyer, I was no longer a lone victim pleading my case. I was part of a system, a set of rules and procedures that my parents couldn't bend and Chloe couldn't charm her way out of. The investigation was no longer just me trying to get my sister to understand the gravity of her actions. It was now a formal process, with paperwork, claim numbers, and official correspondence. I spent the rest of the day gathering my documents: the vehicle purchase agreement under the LLC's name, my insurance policy, the police report number. Each piece of paper was a brick in the wall I was building around myself, a fortress of facts and legal standing. The clever trap wasn't a complex scheme, it was simply the truth. The truth that my car was not a family toy to be borrowed and broken, but a professional asset governed by laws they didn't understand. And I, as the owner of my business, had a duty to uphold those laws. The passive, wounded victim was gone. In her place was an active strategist, and the game was about to change. The first official salvo was fired not by me, but by my lawyer. Sarah drafted a formal letter, printed on her firm's intimidating letterhead, and sent it via certified mail to my parents' house, addressed to Chloe. A copy was also sent to my parents as the owners of the home where Chloe resided. The letter was a masterpiece of cold, legal prose. It outlined the events of the unauthorized use of the vehicle belonging to Riley Designs, LLC, detailed the estimated damages, and formally stated that the LLC's insurance company would be pursuing Chloe for full restitution. It mentioned the police report and concluded by advising her to contact her own insurance provider, if she had one, and to have her legal representative contact Sarah's office directly. The fallout was immediate and explosive. My phone rang less than an hour after the mail was delivered. It was my father, and his voice was a low growl of disbelief and fury. "A lawyer, Riley? You sent a lawyer's letter to your own sister. What in the world are you thinking?" "I'm thinking like a business owner, Dad," I replied, my voice calm and steady. I had rehearsed this moment, preparing myself for the inevitable onslaught. "This isn't a business. This is family," he roared, his legendary calm completely shattered. "You've brought strangers into our private affairs. You filed a police report against Chloe. Do you have any idea how that makes us look?" "It's not about how it looks," I said. "It's about what's right. The car is a business asset. I am legally obligated to protect my company's assets. My lawyer and my insurance agent both confirmed it. If I don't do this, I could be committing fraud." I heard my mother get on the extension, her voice trembling with emotion. "Riley, please, call this off. This is tearing our family apart. Your sister is in her room, crying her eyes out. You've terrified her." "Good," I said, the single word hanging in the air. "She should be terrified. She committed a crime and caused tens of thousands of dollars in damages. She needs to understand that her actions have real, serious consequences." That evening, they descended upon my apartment. It wasn't a visit, it was an ambush. My father, my mother, and Chloe. They stood in my doorway, a united front of familial indignation. Chloe's eyes were red and puffy, but as she looked at me, her sorrow was quickly eclipsed by a familiar, stubborn anger. "You're trying to ruin my life," she accused, her voice cracking. "All over a stupid car." "It's not about the car anymore, Chloe," I said, stepping aside to let them in, though I remained standing, a clear signal that this was not a social call. "It's about your complete lack of respect and accountability." My father stepped forward, holding up the lawyer's letter as if it were a piece of evidence in a trial. "We told you we would pay the deductible, Riley. There was no need for this escalation." "Your offer to pay the deductible doesn't solve the problem," I explained, trying one last time to make them understand. "It doesn't cover the diminished value of the vehicle, the cost of a rental for my business, or the increase in my company's insurance premiums. More importantly, it just teaches Chloe the same old lesson, that mom and dad will always be there to clean up her messes." It was then that Chloe lashed out, her fear and desperation curdling into ugly, poorly executed threats. "You'll be sorry," she spat, her face contorted with rage. "I'll tell everyone what a horrible, vindictive person you are. You'll lose all your clients when they find out how you treat your own family." The threat was so ludicrous, so childish, that I almost laughed. It was the desperate gambit of someone with no real power, someone who had only ever known how to fight with emotional manipulation. Her outburst was a gift. It shattered the illusion of the poor, remorseful victim my parents had tried so hard to construct. In that moment, they saw her not as their fragile, artistic daughter, but as a cornered animal, lashing out with baseless, empty threats. I looked calmly at my sister, then at my parents, whose faces had registered a flicker of shock at the venom in Chloe's voice. "Is that really what you think, Chloe?" I asked quietly. "That my clients who hire me for my professionalism and attention to detail will fire me because I followed the law? You still don't get it. This isn't a family argument anymore. This is a legal proceeding. Your feelings, my feelings, and your threats are all irrelevant. The only thing that matters now are the facts." The confrontation ended not with a bang, but with a stunned silence. They had come expecting to intimidate me, to guilt-trip me into submission. Instead, I had met their emotional onslaught with a calm, unbreachable wall of logic and legality. They left my apartment in a state of disarray, their united front fractured. Chloe's obvious lies and desperate threats had failed to move me, and in doing so, had only served to confirm the truth of her character in the eyes of our parents. The foundation of their family dynamic had been shaken, and for the first time, I could see the cracks beginning to show. In the weeks that followed, Chloe and my parents scrambled to regain control, but they were playing a game whose rules they didn't understand. Chloe, on the advice of some friend, tried to file a counter-complaint, claiming I had lent her the car and was now reneging. It was a desperate, foolish move that was immediately dismissed when my lawyer produced the text messages she had sent me after the crash, the ones where she arrogantly declared our parents would force me to forgive her. There was nothing in our communication that even remotely suggested permission had been granted. Her lie was not just exposed, it was documented. Meanwhile, my insurance company's investigative team was brutally efficient. They treated the case with the impersonal diligence of any major claim. They pulled Chloe's driving record, and what they found was shocking, even to me. It turned out my sister, the free spirit who couldn't be bothered with rules, had a history of irresponsibility that went far beyond what my parents had ever let on. There were 2 prior speeding tickets and a citation for reckless driving, all of which our father had quietly paid and sent her to online driving school for, effectively hiding the incidents from me and, more importantly, from his own car insurance company. The investigator, a man with a weary, senile voice, called me to report his findings. "Ms. Riley," he said, "it seems your sister has a pattern. Because your father handled these tickets through deferral programs, they didn't hit her official record in a way that would suspend her license, but they're all on file at the county court. She's a high-risk driver, and she was operating your vehicle without authorization. This strengthens our case for full recovery significantly." the stakes had escalated dramatically. This was no longer just about the cost of repairs. It was about a documented history of reckless behavior. The insurance company, armed with this new information, informed my parents that due to Chloe's driving history and the unauthorized use, their own insurance policy might not cover the damages. They were now facing the full, terrifying prospect of being held personally liable for the entire cost: the repairs, my rental fees, the diminished value of the car, and all associated legal expenses. The bill was rapidly approaching $30,000. This new reality forced a second, more powerful confrontation. This time, it was my parents who requested the meeting, their tone devoid of the previous anger and filled with a quiet desperation. We met at their house, at the same kitchen table where this had all begun. Chloe was there, but she was a different person. The smirk was gone, replaced by a pale, haunted look. "Riley," my father began, his voice heavy. We've seen the report from your insurance company. We didn't know about the other tickets." "You mean you didn't know I would find out about them?" I corrected gently. He flinched but didn't argue the point. "Their lawyers are saying, they're saying we could be responsible for everything. We'd have to take out a second mortgage on the house." My mother looked at me, her eyes filled with a pain that was, for the first time, not about her disappointment in me, but about her fear for their future. "We can't afford that, Riley. It would ruin us." This was the moment. The spell of Chloe's victimhood was finally, irrevocably broken. My parents' instinct to protect her had slammed into the hard wall of financial ruin. They could no longer afford their enabling behavior. I took a deep breath and laid the file I had brought with me on the table. It contained a copy of the police report, the insurance investigator's summary of Chloe's driving record, and a detailed, itemized list of the costs. "This is the reality of the situation," I said, my voice soft but firm. "This is the consequence. NCE, not just for Chloe, but for you too. For years, you've shielded her from every mistake. You thought you were protecting her, but you were just preventing her from growing up. You taught her that actions don't have consequences, and now you're about to pay the price for that lesson." Chloe began to cry, but this time, the tears were silent and genuine. They were the tears of someone who was finally, truly, understanding the depth of the trouble she was in. She looked at our parents, then at me, and for the first time, I didn't see an antagonist. I saw a scared young woman who had been failed by the very people who loved her most. "What do we do?" my mother whispered, her gaze fixed on the terrifying numbers on the page. "You're going to let the process play out," I said, "and you're going to help Chloe figure out how she's going to take responsibility for her own life. That's the only way any of us get through this." The irrefutable proof, the cold, hard facts from the police and the insurance company, had done what my anger never could. It had forced them all to face the truth. The antagonist's spell wasn't just broken, it was shattered. The family showdown I had been anticipating for weeks came not in a courtroom or a lawyer's office, but at my father's 60th birthday dinner. It was supposed to be a celebratory event, a gathering of our extended family, aunts, uncles, and cousins, at a private room in my father's favorite Italian restaurant. My parents had insisted I come, a desperate attempt to project an image of family unity that we all knew was a lie. I agreed, knowing that this public stage was the perfect place for the final act of this drama to unfold. I arrived to a scene of forced merriment. My uncle was telling a loud, booming joke, and my cousins were laughing. My parents were smiling, but their smiles were brittle, their eyes darting nervously toward the door every few seconds. Chloe was sitting at the far end of the table, huddled into herself, picking at a breadstick. She looked pale and small, and she refused to meet my gaze. The evening progressed through a minefield of stilted conversation. My aunt, a well-meaning but notoriously nosy woman, finally breached the unspoken tension. "So, Riley," she said brightly, "your mother tells me you got a new car. How exciting, we haven't seen it yet." A hush fell over the table. My mother shot me a panicked look, a silent plea to lie, to deflect, to do anything but tell the truth. My father cleared his throat, ready to jump in with a prepared excuse. But I held up a hand, a small, simple gesture that commanded the room. "Actually, Aunt Carol," I said, my voice calm and clear, "there was an incident with the car. It was wrecked just a week after I bought it." A collective gasp went around the table. My uncle leaned forward. "Wrecked? My goodness, are you all right?" "I'm fine," I replied, my gaze shifting to my sister. "I wasn't driving. Chloe took the car without my permission while I was sick and crashed it into a guardrail." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. All eyes swiveled to Chloe, who shrank under the weight of their collective stare, her face flaming with a mixture of shame and humiliation. My father started to speak, to offer a defense, but I continued, my voice never rising, my tone remaining factual and dispassionate. "As some of you know, I own my own business. The car was a company asset, registered to my LLC, so when Chloe wrecked it, it became a legal matter. There was a police report, and my business insurance is now handling the claim." I paused, letting the words sink in. They discovered that Chloe has a history of reckless driving that my parents had hidden. As a result, Mom and Dad's insurance won't cover the damages, and they are now facing a bill for over $30,000. My mother let out a small, choked sob. My father sat frozen, his face ashen. This wasn't the angry, emotional outburst they had feared, it was something far more devastating. It was the calm, systematic exposure of the truth, stripped of all familial sentiment. I wasn't attacking them, I was simply stating the facts, laying bare the years of secrets and enabling for the entire family to see. My uncle, a pragmatic accountant, looked at my father with stunned disbelief. "Mark, is this true? You hid her driving record." My father could only nod, his shame palpable. It was in this moment of public humiliation, with the judgment of the entire family upon them, that Chloe finally broke. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Her eyes were swimming with tears, but for the first time, she looked directly at me, and what I saw in her gaze was not anger, but a profound, gut-wrenching realization. "She's right," Chloe said, her voice trembling but clear. "She's right. It's all my fault. I did it. I was jealous of her success, of her car. I was stupid and reckless, and I thought I could get away with it because I always get away with it." She then turned to our parents. "And you let me," she whispered, the accusation hanging in the air. "You always cleaned up my messes. You taught me that nothing was ever my fault. You were so busy protecting me that you never taught me how to be a good person." It was a brutal, honest, and devastating confession. In that public forum, surrounded by the family whose opinion they valued so much, my parents had to face the consequences of their parenting. The image they had so carefully curated had been shattered. Then Chloe did something that stunned us all. She walked to my end of the table, tears streaming down her face, and stood before me. "I am so sorry, Riley," she said, the words raw and heartfelt. "I will pay you back. I don't care how long it takes. I will get a second job. I will sell my art. I will pay back every single cent. And I will never, ever expect you to just forgive me again." The climax wasn't a shouting match. It was a quiet, powerful moment of accountability. It was the triumphant, decisive action of my sister finally breaking free from the cocoon of entitlement my parents had woven around her. The spell was broken, not by force, but by the simple, undeniable weight of the truth. The aftermath of my father's birthday dinner was not a miraculous, overnight healing, but the slow, painful, and necessary resetting of our family's bones. The public exposure of their secrets forced my parents to confront the reality of their enabling behavior in a way my private anger never could. The judgment in the eyes of their siblings was a far more potent catalyst for change than the frustration of their daughter. The most significant change was in Chloe. The public confession seemed to lance a boil that had been festering within her for years. She was true to her word. The very next week, she dropped 2 of her art classes and picked up more hours at the coffee shop. She began taking on commissions for pet portraits, churning out charcoal sketches with a desperate, newfound work ethic. She and my parents sat down with a financial advisor and drew up a formal repayment plan. It would take her years, nearly a decade, to pay back the full amount, but the act of taking responsibility was transformative. The sullen entitlement was replaced by a quiet, humble determination. My lawyer, Sarah, helped me navigate the final stages of the insurance claim. We arranged a settlement. My parents, using a significant portion of their retirement savings, made a substantial down payment to my insurance company. The remaining balance was structured as a formal loan to Chloe, with my parents as co-signers. It was a harsh financial blow, but it was a clean one. The lawyers and insurance agents faded away, and what was left was a family matter, but one now governed by contracts and consequences instead of emotional manipulation. The antagonist, Chloe's reckless entitlement, had been financially and legally dismantled. A few months later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Chloe called and asked if I would meet her for coffee. I was hesitant, but I agreed. We sat at a small table in a quiet cafe, the silence between us awkward at first. "I've made the first 3 payments," she said softly, staring into her latte. "On time." "I know," I said. "My lawyer gets a notification." She looked up and I could see a genuine remorse in her eyes that had never been there before. "I hate what I did, Riley. Not just because of the money. I hate that I hurt you. You were the one person who always worked so hard for everything you had, and I just spit on it. I was a terrible sister." It was the apology I had needed to hear from the beginning, offered freely, without coercion. I found myself softening, the hard shell of my anger beginning to crack. "You were," I agreed, a faint smile touching my lips. "But you're trying not to be now. That matters." Our relationship began to rebuild, slowly and cautiously. We started with coffee, then lunch. I learned more about her art, and she started asking questions about my business, showing a genuine interest for the first time. The old dynamic was gone. She no longer saw me as a rival or a safety net, but as a sister and equal. My parents, too, began to treat me differently. They started respecting my boundaries, treating me not as their responsible daughter, but as an independent adult. The peace in our family was no longer a fragile, artificial thing maintained at my expense, but something truer, built on a foundation of newfound respect. I eventually got a new car, another midnight blue sedan, registered, of course, to Riley Designs, LLC. The first time Chloe saw it, she just nodded. "It's beautiful, Riley," she said quietly. "Don't ever give me a key." I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. The conflict was resolved, the antagonist had faced her downfall, and I felt a sense of peace and vindication that was more satisfying than any. Financial settlement. Justice had been served, not just for my business, but for the future of my family.